Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, in today's episode, obviously we all know that, the Hall of Fame game is today. Obviously everybody knows that we're going to talk a bit about the Chargers at some point during the day. I know I am, especially when I do my live stream later, because yes, I am going to be doing a live stream of the game when the game does go, officially live at 8 o'clock tonight. But for this episode here, we're going to be talking about a different LA team. We're going to be talking about the LA Rams, the Los Angeles Rams. Now, why are we talking about the Rams in this episode? Well, there's a couple of reasons. But specifically, we're talking about it because, if we're going to be serious and honest with ourselves, the Chargers are a good team. They're not a Super Bowl contending team. They're one of those teams that, they're going to make some noise. They might get into the playoffs and win a playoff game, but they're not going to get to a Super Bowl. They're just not there yet. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm overlooking them as far as this game is concerned, even though it is a preseason game. But if we're also being honest with ourselves, for the Detroit Lions, the whole name of the game, the whole, goal and everything for this season is about the Super Bowl. And when it comes to talking about the Super Bowl, you have to talk about those that directly stand in your way. You have to talk about those that are going to pose a threat. They're going to pose a thorn in your paw potentially as somebody who is going to present a challenge. Now, when we take a look at the NFC, the Lions, they're considered arguably one of the top dogs of the NFC conference. They're considered one of the top dogs in the NFL. And once again, many people see the Detroit Lions as potential Super Bowl frontrunners. However, as I was just saying, that does not mean that the Lions do not have competition vying for the Super Bowl. Because just like they themselves are, there are at least, in my honest opinion, 3 other teams that many this offseason have stated have serious shots to also make a Super Bowl run. And that I'm talking about specifically from the NFC. I'm not saying there's just, 3 other teams in the NFL that can be, serious Super Bowl contenders. I'm just talking about from the NFC. When you take a look at the NFC, the 4 primary teams, in my opinion, that are considered Super Bowl frontrunners, they're considered Super Bowl contenders at the current moment. Obviously, the Lions, the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Rams. Those are the 4 teams that are considered right now, if you talk to most people, are your most likely Super Bowl frontrunners from the NFC this year. And obviously the reasoning behind those teams is relatively straightforward, at least for the Lions, at least for the Eagles, and at least for the Commanders. When you take a look at the Eagles, they won the Super Bowl last year. For a lot of people, until proven otherwise, they're going to be in the front running. And on top of that, they've got a lot of talent. There's a lot about them that a lot of people like. When you take a look at the Commanders, this is a team that last year had a really, really great season. They got to the championship game. They just absolutely showed that, they're going to be a problem. Now, whether or not they're able to duplicate that success going into this year, nobody's 100% certain on. But I'm sure as hell not going to doubt them. But outside of the Lions, which, they have been Super Bowl frontrunners for the last 2 years. They've been one of the best teams in the NFL over the last 2 years. And then, like I said, the Eagles and the Commanders, whose reasons are relatively straightforward. The Rams, their case for why they're considered a Super Bowl runner is primarily centered upon one singular player. And I'm going to tell you this right now. This has been the case for the majority of that player's career. And everything for the Rams' chances of success for getting to a Super Bowl, it rests squarely on Matt Stafford's shoulders. Now, I know some people are going to be like, well, David, that's not exactly a very, inspiring reason. That's not exactly, this like huge wow, revelation. Because as with every team in the NFL, the quarterback shares, or the quarterback shoulders the lion's share of the responsibility to get a team to a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying he shoulders everything, but he does shoulder quite a bit of it. But with the Rams, probably more so than any other team in the NFL, that burden is at its greatest. The Rams do have a pretty well-built team. They're led by a coach that's also been to a Super Bowl before, won a Super Bowl on top of that, in Sean McVay. So it's like, okay, they definitely have all the pieces there. They do. However, the issue is that the Rams totally rely on Stafford to make their offense work. And it has been, proven painfully obvious and true over the last few years, ever since, he and Goff got traded to the opposite teams. And no further evidence of this is needed to be seen than in the 2022 season as a whole, but also any other game that when the Rams have not had Stafford in the lineup, either due to the fact that, the Rams sat him to rest him or because he actually was injured for a game or two here or there. Because if you take a look at it, since 2022, when Stafford has not been in the lineup for the Rams have gone a grand total of 3-8. Not exactly very inspiring. It pretty much tells me that, hey, when Stafford's out of the lineup, the Rams are toast. Now, I will say this. That's also, how do I put this? I will also say that is rather typical for just about any team, because when the starting quarterback is typically not in the lineup, usually does not bode well for that team to win games. However, there's a reason why I said usually, because just because, that the quarterback is not in the starting lineup, the starting quarterback, it does not mean that there have been a few occasions in history where, a backup quarterback can come in and either, kind of steady the ship, kind of keep things afloat just long enough for the starting quarterback to get back, or in, other cases, the backup quarterback comes in, completely takes over for what would have been the former starter, and, they get all the way to the damn Super Bowl. And there's actually been a couple of examples of this. Nick Foles with the 2017 Eagles, Jeff Hostetler with the 1990 Giants, Kurt Warner with the 99 Rams, even Tom Brady with the 2001 Patriots, Earl Morrall with the 72 Dolphins, Jim Plunkett with both the 80 and 83 Raiders, Doug Williams with the then 1987 Redskins, Trent Dilfer with the 2000 Ravens, and then the last one I could think of was Bubby Brister with the 1998 Broncos. These are all guys that were originally the backup. Either they came in and replaced the quarterback indefinitely that was in front of them, or while the quarterback was out dealing with injury, they came in, filled the void for a couple of weeks, to keep the ship right on rolling. Now, why do I bring this up? The reason I bring it up is because, as everybody knows, Matthew Stafford is once again dealing with a back injury. And the Rams have been remarkably very quiet about Stafford's health as of late, because they're stating that the back injury he's dealing with is back soreness. And that's why he hasn't been participating in training camp. However, the thing about this is that the issue was originally stated by McVay to be a minor issue, and that Stafford would only miss the first week. The problem is that currently Stafford has already passed that 1 week, kind of like deadline, and he's about now on the verge of missing his second week of training camp. And for me, the reason why this is huge news is because, number one, as I already stated, the Rams are considered one of the best teams in the NFC with, heavy emphasis, with Stafford in the lineup. But the reason why this whole, kind of like mystery around Stafford's health is such a big deal is because if you go back to the 2022 season when the Rams just absolutely fell off a cliff when they were supposed to be, defending their Super Bowl title and trying to get back to a second one, Stafford, again, during this period, there were reports that he was dealing with back soreness, and Stafford was held out a lot of training camp due to that back soreness. But again, at the same time, The Rams played it off as if it was only a minor issue and that it should pose no threat to their quarterback's health or to their season ambitions to repeat as Super Bowl champions. The problem is that from word go, once Stafford actually was deemed, healthy enough or good enough to be able to actually play, it became painfully obvious that the back problem that Stafford had been dealing with, it was more than a minor issue. And it was not only greatly affecting his ability to play, but it was also greatly affecting the Rams' ability to win games. Because again, you go back to the first 8 games out of the 9 that Stafford played in 2022, I'm just going to put it this. For a guy that has been in the league for, as long as he played terrible. Absolutely terrible that year. And again, I attribute that to the fact that he was dealing with the problem that he was dealing with. Because in the first 8 games in 2022, Stafford completed only 68.4% of his passes, which that is pretty damn good. That's at least above league average. But he only completed 1,928 yards for 6.8 an average a catch. And he had 8 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, which means 2.8% for both of those. And he only had an 85 passer rating. I'm not a, mathematical wizard by any stretch of the imagination. But that's not good. Especially for a veteran quarterback like Stafford's, stature. The problem is that the reason why I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the Rams now like, hey, you know what? They're in some serious trouble, is because if Stafford goes down, that means you then have to rely on who's your backup quarterback. Well, you go back to 2022, the Rams didn't really have a backup quarterback that was really worth mentioning. In fact, it wasn't until they eventually signed Baker Mayfield, who came in and pretty much, hey, you know what? Week 1 after they signed him, they threw him in and played. Which is not normally how most teams do it, but it was like they were so desperate for a backup to come in and try and, give them some stability that they got a guy that literally had just left his previous team, and they're like, hey, we're going to bring you in and you're going to start for us at the same week. And it's like, dude. And the reason why I'm looking at it this time is like, okay, maybe now they might have a better backup in comparison to what they had in 2022. But the backup quarterback that they have directly behind Stafford is Jimmy Garoppolo. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm going to say this right now, he hasn't played well enough in the last couple of years that should inspire anybody to think that if Stafford goes down with a long-time injury, that, they're going to be able to do anything. And it tells me this. If you go back to based off of 2022, if the Rams lose Stafford for a long period of time, they're going to fall apart. Because I'm sorry, it's already been kind of proven that if Stafford's not out there, they're not going to do well. And again, that sore back that that Stafford had in 2022, that eventually turned into a spinal cord contusion. And I know this right now. Ram fans are going to try and downplay this something fierce. But, Sean McVay's doing the exact same thing. He's trying to do damage control. But McVay can try and calm down all the concerns he has about how serious the injury is, and that, it's not that big a deal because we have Jimmy G right behind us. But it's like, listen, I'm telling you this right now. Jimmy G is not a guy you want filling in if Stafford goes down because, well, number one, the last time Jimmy G was a starting quarterback in the NFL with, the then Las Vegas Raiders, I'm going to tell you this right now, and they are still the Las Vegas Raiders, but they have changed their name quite a bit over the years as far as what their city is. But the point of the matter is that Jimmy G is not a starting level quarterback anymore. And in fact, if you put him in for an extended period of time, you then have to start having the conversation of, okay, well, how long is he going to stay healthy before we have to think about putting in our third string quarterback? Because you have to think about it here. Jimmy G has had to deal with a lot of injuries over his career as well. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that when you take a look at what the Rams quarterback situation is as far as, okay, we're dealing with a very similar script to what happened in 2022. You, again, don't really exactly have the greatest quarterback position behind Stafford, and you're still trying to vie for a Super Bowl. All that information as far as where it's lying is telling me that for us, the Lions, that's good news. Because it's like, okay, here. We know that the Lions are vying for a Super Bowl. We know that the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL and in the NFC that are vying for a Super Bowl. So it's like, okay, we already know that the Rams are a team that, hey, we've beaten them 2 times over the last couple of years, ever since the Lions have kind of, finally became one of those best teams in the NFL. We've been able to beat them. We've been able to hang tough with them. But that still means that they're a pretty damn good team. But the reason why that was always the case is because Stafford was in the lineup. I mean, you want a perfect example, go back to the game that started the season last year. They lost virtually almost all of their skill players, and they were having problems with their offensive line in that first game. And yet Stafford was still able to keep that team in the game all the way up until the final drive when we finally beat them with that touchdown by David Montgomery. So it's like, okay, if Stafford is not able to play either for the majority of the season, or if he does and he's just not fully healthy because of this back soreness, that's really going to pose a problem for them, and it's really going to be an opening for the Detroit Lions. Because let's understand something here. I truly am 100% of the mind that, the Lions want to prove that they're better than everybody. And I truly believe that they are. But we also have to understand the reality of the situation. When you see an opening, when you see a weakness that you can exploit, that's where you attack. Because again, the whole name of the game is trying to get a better record, trying to get yourself in a better position so that way you can navigate through the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. Well, when you take a look at the Rams, we play them this year. Now, whether or not Stafford is going to be healthy at the time that happens, I don't know. It's, towards the mid-late point of the year, so it's like whether or not Stafford is even going to be able to suit up, if he's even going to be 100% healthy, nobody even knows at that point. But let's understand this. The reason why I'm talking about this in relation to the Lions, other than the fact that it benefits the Lions' Super Bowl ambitions, is that, again, we have to go back to the trade itself. The Rams were wanting to try and, find an upgrade at quarterback so that way they could go and win their Super Bowl, which, okay, you know what? Great, grand, glorious, they went and won their Super Bowl. They did. The problem is that when they did it, they had to mortgage damn near everything in order to win that Super Bowl. And they've not gotten back since. And the problem is that what I believe is starting to really happen here is you're starting to see the sting for the Rams of the late effects of the trade of Goff to the Lions and, when Stafford got traded to the Rams. Because unlike Stafford, Goff is just entering his prime. And Goff is 7 years younger than Stafford. Now, what that means is that the Lions' future, not only this year, but for, at least 7-8 years down the road, it is rather secured. Because it means, hey, you know what? We have the ability for years to come at least that, hey, our quarterback is healthy, our quarterback is in his prime, we should be able to contend for Super Bowls for, at least the remainder of the decade, if not going into the next decade. The problem with the Rams, on the other hand, is their future it's significantly up in the air. Stafford, at best, has maybe one more year of quality football left in him. Especially, again, with all the injuries that he's had to sustain over the years. And further, you have to consider that ever since the trade went down between the Rams and the Lions, Goff has outperformed Stafford in 3 out of those 4 years. Because go back to 2021, when the trade got started, and from that point until now, Goff has performed as such. He's been tied 4th most in terms of completion percentage in that time. He has the 2nd most passing yards. He's tied 3rd in pass average per throw. He's ranked 4th in passing touchdowns. He's ranked 7th in pass touchdown percentage. He's tied 9th in interceptions. He's tied 3rd in interception percentage per throw. And he's ranked 3rd in passer rating. And again, this is for a quarterback that has played 50 plus or more games. Because again, I don't want somebody in my ranking that's only played like 35 or 40 games. It's like, listen, you need to have played the majority of the time out there. You need to have a substantial, statistical profile or, whatever in order for you to actually be able to be considered for this. And the reason why I say that is because there are going to be people like, well, the stats don't make sense because of this player not being there, this player not being there. The reason why it doesn't make sense to you is because I'm not including them because they haven't played long enough, in my opinion. But when you take a look at those stats for Goff versus Stafford, you really are starting to see how the back end of this trade is really coming back to bite the Rams in the ass. Because think about this. Everybody just watched quarterback season number 2 off of Netflix. Everybody knows that Goff literally said that how McVay handled it was immature. He didn't, communicate with him. It was just like, hey, you know what? We're trading you. Goodbye. And it's like, okay, here. Everybody wants to talk about the reasons as to why Stafford and Goff got traded. Everybody knows the reasons why Goff got traded. It was because McVay didn't like him. McVay had lost faith in him. McVay pretty much wanted to find somebody to make a scapegoat, and he centered his attentions on Goff. Well, think about this. Just truly think about this for half a second. With Goff here in Detroit, a team that was literally dumpster fire material when he got here, now look where they're at now. Because Holmes and Campbell have built that team, that offense around him. They invested in him. They believed in him. Had McVay simply swallowed his damn pride, had actually been a decent human being, and mature about the whole situation, I've said this before, I'll say it again now. McVay could have built a dynasty with Goff. But now he has to settle, in essence, really, for one title with Stafford. Now, I know for a lot of people say, well, settling is not the right word. Yeah, it is in this case. Because we've seen how Goff has been so prolific with the Lions. Imagine where the Rams could have been if they'd have just stayed with Goff, actually said, we believe in you, we're going to build something around you. They had kept those extra 3 picks that they had traded away to the Lions, the 2 firsts and the 1 third. Imagine where the Rams could be right now if they had kept that. If they'd have kept all that in-house. Dude, there's no way to tell where they'd be. Because look what the Lions did with all that. With 1 third-round pick, 2 first-round picks, and Goff, they took that and literally turned it into the team they have right now. Drafting the likes of J-Mo, Gibbs, Campbell, Hutch. I mean, crying out loud, dude. They just absolutely made the most out of all of that. And supposedly, if Les Snead is this great GM, he should have been able to have figured that out. And that's my whole point. If the Rams had stuck with Goff, they could have had Goff right now where he's at and had multiple years to win multiple Super Bowls. But instead, now they've got to settle with a quarterback in Stafford who's aging. He's now starting to become very more, how do I say this? More likely to get injured over, ridiculous stuff, because back soreness is not typically something you're going to see, especially when it's early in the offseason, because it's like, okay, well, how is your back sore? You haven't been playing for 4 or 5 months. And when you take a look at the situation now, Goff has multiple years to build his legacy in Detroit upon what it's already been, whereas the Rams, they kind of have to look at things kind of like in the rearview mirror, like, you know what, our time's pretty much almost up. The clock's almost kind of struck midnight for us. And you have to think about it. Going back to those stats, Goff in every single category since 2021, top 10. 6 out of the 8 categories that I had, he's top 5 or better. 4 out of the 8 categories, he's top 3 or better. And again, like I said, at 30 years old, Goff easily has 7 or 8 years of good top-end football left, especially with the talent on the offense, which is young, hungry, and definitely energetic. So it's like, okay, the Lions are really set to make some hay out of this. But as I also said, when you take a look at Stafford since the same period of time with that trade, Goff absolutely outshines him. The only thing that Stafford can say he's done more in regards to Goff is that he's actually won a Super Bowl, which he barely won. And again, the Rams had to mortgage everything in order to even make it happen. They had to pull off trades. They had to sign damn near every superstar they get their hands on just to beat the freaking low-hanging fruit Bengals. But since 2021, Stafford has been ranked 12th in completion percentage, 6th in yards, tied 3rd in pass average, so he's just like Goff there. But he's only ranked 10th in passing touchdowns, 12th in pass touchdown percentage, tied 15th in interceptions, tied 15th in interception percentage per throw, and ranked 12th in passer rating. Now, I know some Rams fans are going to say, well, that's because, Stafford was injured in 2022. That's my whole point. If Stafford was not having to deal with the fact that all these injuries are starting to pile up, they're all starting to add up, he's getting older, and now you're starting to really take a look at the fact that, hey, this quarterback that you invested so much in, because let's call it for what it is, you've invested at least a contract and a couple of reworkings of that contract, or extensions, however you want to call it. You invested all of those draft picks in him. You got one Super Bowl out of it. That's it. And on top of that, that quarterback that you traded has not statistically outperformed the one you threw away. And again, this is Stafford's third back injury in, recent years. Because he's had back problems that have gone all the way back to 2019 when he had a fractured vertebrae when he was playing with us. Then, like I said, in 2022, he had a spinal contusion. And then, now he's dealing with it again. And it's like, okay, well, where the hell is this going to lead? And again, at 37 years old, pretty much Stafford's out of his prime. If he's in it, it's like the last tail end year of it. And again, I will say this, the offense of the Rams, it is good. It has really good pieces. I mean, for crying out loud, you got Devontae Adams, you've got Puka Nacua, you got Kyron Williams. I mean, you've got pieces there. But the problem is, it's not as deep as the Lions. I mean, the Lions, their offense, I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a weapon. That's just how damn good our offense is. But again, as I also said, the Rams look to Stafford to make everything with that offense work. Everything, whether it's run or pass. The Lions, while yeah, they rely a lot on Goff, and Goff is the one that manages everything, if for whatever reason Goff had to step out for a game or two, they could still make their offense work and just run like normal. Why? Because of all the other talent that they have there. That's not to diminish Goff's ability, that's not to diminish Goff's talent, but it lets you know that, hey, the Lions, they can make do because that's how well built of a team they are. And then when you take a look at the actual personal rankings that I just talked about with Stafford, only 3 of the rankings out of 8 is Stafford even in the top 10. And he's only top 5 in 1. Age has really started to catch up to Stafford. Like, it has become apparent that it's like, you know what? This guy is not the same anymore. The clock has really started to run out on the Rams and Stafford. Whereas with the Lions and Goff, it's barely gotten started. And when you consider also the fact that the Lions overall are a better team, as I already stated, their chemistry right now is absolutely through the damn roof. Whereas with the Rams, the thing that they're trying to get their chemistry to, they can't because Stafford's not in practice. It really speaks to how this back soreness that Stafford is dealing with and what the Rams are trying to figure out what to do with, it could really unravel the entire Rams season and shift the NFC playoff picture in the upcoming 2025 season. Because let's think about this way. If the Rams decided to play this much the same way they did in 2022, then the Rams are going to have a very similar outcome to what they had in 2022. Which is another very disappointing season, and also further wasting Stafford's twilight years, and one of the 2 years that they were able to sign Devontae Adams to a contract. But the news in and of itself shows that the Lions, already one of the biggest competitors that they've got going into the NFC this year for this season, they're between a rock and a hard place, because it's like, okay, how the hell do they move forward? How the hell do they handle a back injury, especially considering a quarterback that's been having more of these lately? Because I'm going to tell you this right now, Stafford's not a spring chicken, and back injuries are extremely persnickety. They're just like hamstring injuries. It's like you have to handle it just the right way, because one wrong move, and that's it, you're done. So with the Lions making further steps forward and continuing to build and bolster their young core, which has turned into an experienced and nasty group of extremely talented players, having the Rams in the position that they are to where they could potentially fall apart over this one injury, the magnitude that means for the Lions' path towards the Super Bowl means that it not only gets one slightly easier, but it also means that, hey, now we have the ability to really start running things the way we want them, because it's like, okay, we have one less person or one less team that we have to deal with that's in our way, so it allows us to put ourselves in a better position to hoist that first Lombardi trophy ever. Because let's think about this, and I'm going to be entirely honest with ourselves. Well, yes, you have to have a talented team, you have to have all these pieces that follow that are there in the team. You also at some point have to have a couple of things kind of bounce your way. And again, this is kind of like one of those things where it's like, hey, the Rams are one of those teams that, you know what, they stand currently in the way that the Lions have to try and get to that Super Bowl. But if Stafford continues to have the problems with his back that he's had before, that's one less thing they got to deal with. Just saying. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to talk about this. Again, I know everybody's focusing on the Hall of Fame game, and trust me, I will live stream that game. I will have that game tonight. So you guys can all tune in for that. If something changes, I will let you know, but that is my intent and plan. But having said that, I've reached the end of this episode, so I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I want to highly encourage y'all to please not only subscribe to the channel, but make sure you watch the next episode. And if you are subscribing to the channel, or if you've just subscribed in the past and you've not had a chance to do it, please, oh please, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content that I push out. And again, I hope everybody out there has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.